Hello, everyone. Welcome to your next weekly edition of Catalog and Cocktails, where we've got our honest chat about data and then the world of data and how it affects data management and all sorts of different aspects. So we've got a really exciting and special guest for you today, which we'll introduce in just a second. For those of you that are new to Catalog and Cocktails, we spend the first 30 minutes of time here kind of talking, and today we have an awesome guest. And then afterwards, we kind of hang out and we do some live chat afterwards. So happy to have you here. Go ahead and stay muted, and afterwards we can unmute and chat a little bit more. I'm Tim Gasper, Director of Product at data.world, and joined by Juan.
Good afternoon, Tim. I'm Juan Sequeda. I'm the Principal Scientist at data.world, and always this is our honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with some tasty beverage in hand. So our break in the middle of the week. How are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing excellent. And I know we've got some tasty beverages here, which we'll talk about, but we actually are joined by a very special guest, Dwayne, who is from AP and is the Director of Corporate News, ESG, and Data Licensing. Hey, Dwayne, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Great to be here. Thank you so much.
So how are you doing, Dwayne? How's your day, middle of the week going on, and what are you drinking today?
Well, let's start with the good stuff. So I have an Americano in hand, Campari, sweet vermouth, and a little bit of soda, and lots of ice.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a name for that drink?
Americano, it's called.
Americano, okay, but not the coffee version. This is the boozy version.
The good version. Well, the coffee version's pretty good too, but this is the good version, exactly. Yeah, it's a pre-dinner drink for our conversation today, guys.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm having a gin and tonic, and it's green because I put some cucumber in it. I like this
Nice
drink.
You know, cucumber is good for you, so that's a good one.
Exactly. It helps me balance it out.
Yeah, we were joking ahead of time that it's like juicing, but alcohol style. And I'm drinking a Mexican mule, kind of keeping it simple here, but trying a little twist on the typical Moscow mule. So, cheers, y'all.
Cheers. So for everybody who's attending, if on the chat, feel free to kind of chime in, say hello, where are you coming from, what drink do you have in your hand, and let's start this conversation going. Just as a reminder, Catalog and Cocktails, you can find us as a podcast in Apple Podcasts and Spotify or other places. We have our community Slack, so please join us at slack.data.world, where we can keep the conversations going about data culture, actually. So if we're going to go kind of do a quick revamp of what we've been going through, the topic in the last couple of weeks has been around data culture. And the AP, Associated Press, they're really great friends of ours, not just data.world, but personally, like we've been having a lot of great interactions with the AP, learning so much stuff from them. And just chatting with them, we realized that if there's an entity who has been around for hundreds of years and who knows data, and who has evolved in the practices of data and talk about data culture, I think AP is one of the top entities in the world who can go speak to this. And that's why I'm so excited about having this opportunity to chat with you, Dwayne. I think we got a lot to talk about here. So let's kick it off a little bit. Dwayne, tell us a little bit about you and about the AP, and especially, I think not a lot of people know about all the data journalism work that the AP does. So I'd appreciate if you can give us a little bit of intro from there.
Yeah, you bet. Very happy to. And I'm joined by a couple of colleagues today as well that I work really closely with on the data side, Ken Romano and Jen Cooper. We are a 174-year-old company. AP started as a not-for-profit co-op where a couple of newspapers in New York, 3 actually, got together and said, hey, let's sort of pool resources here, and let's generate some news gathering, but let's sort of spread the resources among the three newspapers, and that was really the start of AP. Eventually, you know, in the years that follow, we added our own reporters, and our job today is really to generate a lot of news in a lot of different formats, but also a really big part of what we do as a not-for-profit co-op is we broker, we share, we move all this news from a newspaper in one city to a newspaper in another city, from a radio station here to a radio station there. So sharing the news among the members of the AP as a co-op is one thing we do. And then of course our own news gathering is another huge part of our mandate. We operate in about 200 countries, and we just crank out good, high quality, very neutral, right down the middle journalism every day. We don't do opinion. We'll leave that to the retail media companies. So not-for-profit news co-op, a news wholesaler is another way to think about us, because we sell the news that we create, we sell it to newsrooms around the world. So that's what we do. So this is data is sort of our fourth massive cultural change, because if you can think back, when TV came along, I mean, we all started as a print organization, of course, but when TV came along, it was like, oh, TV culture. How do we adapt to TV culture, right? Radio, how do we adapt to radio culture? Obviously digital culture, and now data. So it's sort of the next progression in terms of the media that we work with, the information that we work with and shape and deliver to customers. So data is tremendously exciting for the AP. It is another language, it's another medium to find news in. It's another medium to deliver news to all of our customers around the world. It offers extraordinary benefits over, let's say, traditional formats. It's obviously much more interactive than a story, for example. And we do find that our data journalism really captures people. Duration was a big metric, at the start of the internet days. How long is someone going to hang on and read your story? Data just takes that and crushes it, because people are interacting with the visualizations and getting hyper local with the data. So it's a remarkably fun time, and AP's all in on data, but we're learning. I mean, it's a lot to learn. It's like learning a language. You got to understand how to listen to it and understand it, and how to speak it. And this is part of I think where we're at right now as a news organization.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and a great introduction. And I've always been very interested and astounded by all the great sort of data products that you guys are putting out there. I've seen some of the things around sort of like farm subsidies, and around some of the things that have been going around the election, obviously, COVID being another thing. And on the topic of elections, obviously there's a huge initiative that y'all have that I think we'll probably dive into quite a bit in today's session, is around AP VoteCast. Do you think you could talk a little bit about what that is and how that kind of came to be?
Yeah, you bet. So the backstory, everybody, is besides producing journalism, since about 1848, I think, AP has also taken on the exercise of counting the votes in elections. So obviously the government counts the votes, right? Various election agencies and bodies and secretaries of state, but that's the government. We believe that a third party without any affiliations to government should also count the vote, and should count it really quickly. We wait weeks for governments to certify, an election result. We don't think folks should wait weeks. So we've been counting elections for decades, and we have a small army of people that we deploy on every election to do that. We're sending about 5,000 people to polling places across the country on November 3rd. So we've been counting the votes for a long time, reporting the votes, and it's an amazing data operation. It is data. It is a beautiful marriage of upstream human data collection, normalization. You imagine we're collecting data from 50 states and the territories, and a lot of that data is just not normalized. I mean, it's different, different values and different jurisdictions and all that stuff. So it's a beautiful exercise in data science to normalize it, collect it, vet it, make sure that the votes we collect in one precinct in November at 9 p.m. match generally the same votes as from the precinct in 18, 16, 14. So it's really an awesome exercise, and we deliver this data to companies and organizations around the world in real time. so they can see what is going on with US elections. So that's our primary sort of function when it comes to US elections. The other thing we added on, and you know, I think everyone may be familiar with this concept of exit polls. So on election nights, often on TV, you'll hear the anchors refer to, you know, the election poll says this is probably going to be the outcome, or, you know, 10% of people leaving the interviewed for the exit poll think this. You know, that was a standard for a long time. And it turned out we were using that data. We bought that data from a third party. And it just turned out that, you know, we just started to really smell that it was not good. There was some flaws in the data, some inherent biases. You know, typically Democrats stop to talk to the exit poll folks. A lot of Republicans don't stop to talk. So right away, your sample is flawed. And then this year is just mind-blowing. I mean, folks are still going to do exit polls this year, but you know, you're going to be approached by someone that looks like Bob or Doug, you know, from from SpaceX, you know, with the mask and the gloves and the gown, and it's not a friendly conversation. I just don't think it's going to be a friendly conversation. And they're going to be socially distanced.
Yeah, more than ever, it's complicated, right?
It's very complicated. So there was inherent flaws in asking people and then, you know, basing data analysis on that. And then this year has just wiped it off the map. So we wanted to, you know, we still wanted to have that information. We wanted to know, well, who is voting? Because the numbers we get when we count the votes themselves, it's obviously anonymous. There's no male, female. There's no what's your income and anything like that. It's just how people voted. For us to tell that story of every election, and every election is a story, you know, we need the color. We need to understand, why did the election go this way? You know, who voted, who didn't vote, who could vote but didn't. So the great data minds at AP and over at the University of Chicago got together about 5 years ago and just started to tackle this problem of sample, this problem of trying to really get a much better sense of how the election is going to unfold, you know, in the coming hours on election day. So that was the beginning of this brand new version of the exit poll that we call VoteCast. So it took a lot of guts, I think, at AP. I think for anyone in data science to stand up and say, we got to think of a better way to do this. You know, that takes some guts and it takes some courage, because so many of our business operations and processes and methods that rely on are so culturally embedded that that you got to put your neck out to pull off something like VoteCast.
So Dwayne,
information. Go ahead.
I think this is a great segue, talking about the trust and asking the questions to the culture and connecting this to the enterprise. And I think enterprises, one of the things that we see all the time is you want to go trust the data, but before you get there, you want to make sure that people are comfortable asking these hard questions. And history tells us, right, when people start asking the hard questions and being skeptical, and we have these conversations, changes occur, and this goes to the kind of in a forward direction. What is your experience, and what can you share about creating that culture where we can ask those hard questions and how that generates positive change?
Yeah. Well, I think we're sort of at an advantage because at AP to some degree, but I don't think we're exclusive in enterprise in any way. But I think one advantage we do have is that that's pretty much all we do every day is just ask questions. And, you know, we don't really believe anything until, you know, we see it and understand it and vet it. So certainly I think culturally, you know, we were predisposed to questioning the old ways, you know, in this particular case, the exit poll. But then you still have to make, you know, it's just a lot of work. It's a lot. AP is a very conservative organization. Stuff doesn't change easily at AP. You know, our standards are very, very high, our ethics are very, very high, and we're hyper protective, you know, of that, because if we lose that, then we just fold up our tent and go home. So, you know, like I said, we started the VoteCast concept about 5 years ago, and it really just started as this problem. Something is not working. The exit poll is not working. We proved it wasn't working, and that was really the first step. So, you know, the first thing we had to do is show our bosses that something is wrong with the way that we've been doing something. And here's the proof. The proof was we showed the exit poll data from 2016, and then we just showed the election results from 2016. And that got us to the first sort of step. That was validation that, yeah, these guys are onto something, that maybe we do need to look at another model here, another approach to changing how we collect this data and how we use this data and the methodology and whatnot. So certainly proving to our bosses what was wrong was the first thing we had to do. And then then we really have to start thinking about, okay, well, what do we replace it with? And that was just an enormous amount of work. And in the data space, of course, it's slippery. You can get led down different paths super easily, not even know it. It's kind of like going through a maze. So it takes dedicated people. This was a core mission for us. So that was another thing in our favor. This was really important data for us. We've been doing this for decades, so it was very important. And that helped us, get the resources necessary and the exec buy-in that we needed a different approach here. But it was proof. I mean, it's a hard project. It is a difficult project. It's not a business case. It's data. It's math. And it took, we were stealth. We came up with a good methodology that we thought was solid. And the other thing that was huge about this product was a sample size. Our sample size this November is going to be 140,000 registered voters. And if you think about a typical, you see in the news every day now, like, a public opinion poll on who's going to win, and often those polls will be 1,000 people. So VoteCast is 140,000. And then obviously it's weighted appropriately state to state to state. So it's really 50 surveys, smaller surveys with a gross sample of 140,000. So it was just messing and fooling around with all these different levers of methodology to test. And fortunately, we had election results to compare it to. So we had an outcome that we could compare to, which just gave us an immovable benchmark, which was super helpful for sure. And then it was just, roll up your sleeves, get going, keep proving it. 16, the methodology looked good. It allowed us, so VoteCast allows, we do all these interviews in the hours before the election. Everything's sort of compiled by about 3 p.m. on election day. And then, we can figure out who's going to win based on that data, even before the polls close. In 2016, it was a small, stealth mode. We weren't licensing this. It was all in-house. And we called the 4 races there 100%. So the data told us who was going to win, and the data was right. So that was super encouraging in terms of our methodology. But there was still, it helped us call the race, but it wasn't an exact match to the outcome. So obviously we still had work to do. So this is just an ongoing, it's like a story that never ends. You're always adding to the story. You're always checking your facts. You're always doing more interviews. You're always, it's just never done. So the team went to work and refined the methodology from 16. And then we went full-blown production with the project and the code in 18, and it performed great. But at 5 p.m. on election day Eastern, we did our own internal analysis, and we accurately were able to predict correctly the outcome of 92% of the Senate and governor races, which is what we look at for this product anyway.
And just to interject on that, 92%, what would you compare that to in the past? Like, what would be a more typical benchmark on something like that?
Well, we really try to be very, cautious in our race calls, but I'd say certainly, I'd say comparable number prior to VoteCast in the 70s.
Okay.
Something
Pretty big difference.
using the traditional exit poll data, not the VoteCast data. So we've got growing confidence for us to make our decisions, just based on this new methodology and this new approach to talking to people. Another really important point, I think, that was vital in our methodology was, the sample just can't be a number. It's got to be weighted properly. A huge thing that we wanted to do with VoteCast, because we sniffed out this change as well. People all used to go to vote at a polling station at the school or whatever, but that started to change, I think, in a substantial way about 8 years ago, and it was changing rapidly in 16. It changed rapidly in 18, and COVID has kind of pushed us all into life in dog years. Like 1 year is now 7 for humans. So you all know, and many of you have probably already voted, how accelerated this trend has become this year, and it's quite remarkable. And it's causing concern, but not for us. Because we designed VoteCast, when we looked at the methodology, we just said, hey, more people are voting in advance. They're not going to be available to talk to at the exit poll. So good news is that we baked in a cohort of advanced voters when we build out our samples. So we have to have so many people, that have voted in advance, either by mail or whatever their method is. So it's been an experience. It's not done. We're going to learn a lot, I think, from this election, and we'll just continue to refine the data and the methodology and learn from it and fuss over it, and pay attention to what we got wrong. And obviously there will be more elections, and we just expect and hope to continue to improve the product so that it continues to give us a very good sense of why Americans have the leaders they do.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like how we talk about having methodology and refining the methodology and learning from our mistakes. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about the people, because I think this is an aspect when we talk about culture. It's not just, it's the process and methodology is one aspect, but the people are key to that culture. Who are the people who does it? How are they interact? What does a team look like? And again, what are the lessons learned here?
Yeah. Bold, courageous, curious, fearless, not afraid to make mistakes, not afraid to admit what they don't know, open-minded, pleasantly critical. These are all, and obviously the science, you got, the grounding. So our data science team is a mix of journalists that love data and are self-taught and see a whole new genre of news and news delivery in this medium. But then, of course, we also have real scientists. We've got statisticians and data scientists on the team as well. And together, it's just magic. I mean, it's like, I'm sure everyone's worked with engineers, and the best engineers aren't the folks who just take the spec and build. They tear the spec apart, and they add to it, and they're creative, and they care about the product, and they care about the users of the product in particular. So our data team is very much made up of folks like that. They're in the news business, so they also have a sharp public service kind of stream in their veins.
And I think this is important that we talk about a lot, is understanding who's the consumer of your data, right? We talk about producers of data, consumers of data, who manage in the middle. Consumers of data is important.
Vital, absolutely. I remember when I first got to AP, and I was on the biz side leading the build of a platform that we were releasing, and I quickly realized that some of our engineers didn't know who was going to be at the other end of their code. You know, and that was a problem. Easily solved, but it really made the products much better, much more relative, much softer, and so on. So yeah, Juan, that's exactly right.
Yeah, so I think getting understanding the people is crucial. Understanding the methodology around this stuff is done. And I remember before we were talking something when we were kind of preparing for this, I wrote this down, is we don't know what was going to come out of the equation, but we know we have the best people on the left side of the equation. I think that's something that really hit me, is having the best people, which is something we've talked about before, is really, really important here. And I think conversations that we had even in the past summit is we want to be able to go hire the best people who understands, who want to hit the ground running with the best data too. So we want to give them the best tools and want to give them the best data so they can go do all the fantastic work with it.
Yeah, and it's you know, I'm obviously thrilled and relieved and very happy that we've got incredibly talented, you know, data scientists on our team that help us produce amazing products. But at the same time, it would not be the same group with the same level of effectiveness were we not to have the journalists who bring the standards and just the need for transparency and the digging. You know, when we get our hands on data, we have to go to court in some cases. We definitely have to file FOIA, Freedom of Information requests, in many cases. No one's handing this out to us. We have to fight for it. So there's skills on our team that the folks who have those skills, you know, they've got a big chip on their shoulder and they don't like authority and they get their hands on the data that the authorities don't want them to get their hands on. Like, that's a vital skill that we married up with solid data science skills and visualization skills and designers. So it's not just hiring the most talented people. I think it's having people that may not be where you want them to be, but you know that they've got an ingredient that you can't live without. And in our case, it's this beautiful marriage of the craft of journalism, the ethics of AP journalism, the standards of AP journalism, married with really great data sourcing. And then amazing distribution. Like, you know, the end user, I mean, data.world provides an incredible interface to our end users. I mean, we work with you guys because we know a lot of our users, they may not be great at writing these queries, right? They're newsroom people. Some are, some aren't. But you know, the platform, we pre-bake some queries in here, and the platform allows our data to be much more accessible to people, to your point, Juan. So it's just a real nice recipe with a bunch of ingredients to make what's on the right of the equal sign, you know, taste really good.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And this is really, really great information. And I think that, you know, a lot of our audience is interested in how they can create an environment of data trust, how they can create great data cultures, and how they can create great data products, right? One of the topics we talk a lot about is this concept of data product management, and y'all do really an amazing job over at the AP of doing that. You know, as sort of a final question to wrap us up here before we do takeaways, you know, some of the companies that are out there, some of the folks in the audience, you know, I would say they're probably earlier on their journey and are still trying to figure out how to build that data culture, how to create such big changes and movements like y'all have been able to do with AP VoteCast and all the other data journalism you're doing. You know, what would be your, you know, top tips to those companies that are trying to establish that culture and that trust in their companies?
Yeah, just ask. I mean, you know, someone needs to be the instigator. There's no doubt about that. That's either someone, in our case, you know, I think it's a mix of really good product folks and some of our salespeople that are sort of pointed at new money. You know, where is the new money here? So I think it's really just asking people to raise their hands. You know, because even if you hired, data scientists to come in, I think in some cases, those folks are going to say, well, what should I do? What are we doing here? And they may definitely, bring methodology and whatnot, but I think we're asking existing staff who's interested in this, and doing that audit and that evaluation of people is a great way to start, because they bring to the table the underlying principles, vision, mandate, and goals of the organization. And I think those folks are there. I think it's a fascinating art and science. I think a lot more people at all companies are starting to hear, at the very least, that, wow, we may be sitting on a lot of money here with the data that is baked into servers all over the place. I'm sure every company's got folks who are thinking along those lines. So, I think the first step is to try and find those people that have that interest, and then you just build from there.
Well, Dwayne, I told you that 30 minutes flies by, and I know we can keep talking about this, and we will after we wrap up the session. But we always have this tradition now. Let's go talk about our takeaways. So, Tim, what are your takeaways after these quick 30 minutes that we've talked here with Dwayne?
Yeah, sure. There's been so much that we've talked about here, and I think that it's pretty incredible what y'all have done at the AP and all the different products and cultural things you've been able to do around data. I would say that one thing that I heard you say that was a big takeaway for me was, first of all, this idea of a success benchmark, right? You looked at 2016 and some of the things that were happening in the past, and you really thought about how you could evolve things over time. And so that felt like something that a lot of companies should look at. How can they be very data-driven and benchmark-driven about their evolution that they're doing? And I really liked this idea that you kind of said around sort of prototyping, starting small, refining it. You tried it in 2016, you tried it in 2018. It sounds like you kind of grew that core group into a much larger movement within AP. And now it's become a major factor that's driving a lot of what you're doing this year during this election. So that's awesome. I think there's a ton of takeaways there that our audience can apply in their own companies.
And for me, I got two takeaways. One, ask why. We got to question the old ways, and someone needs to be the instigator. So asking questions, asking is an important thing. And second, we need to have the people who are not afraid to make mistakes, people who are open-minded. We need to go get the best people are in there. So the people who are willing to go ask why. Dwayne, thank you so much for your time. We'll give you the last word. Any call to actions? What do you want people here to take away from you? And yes, final words.
Sure. Well, on behalf of all my colleagues at AP, thanks for this opportunity. It was great. I hope folks had a good half hour here. I think a couple things. So we're a 170-year-old company, and we're kicking butt when it comes to data in certain sectors. So that's meaningful. Just because we're an old company doesn't mean that we can't do new things. And then the other takeaway is lots more to learn. So, on data.world, folks can find the VoteCast files from 2018. We always put an amazing summary and overview and all the caveats of the data and all that stuff. So that's up there now. If anybody wants to go look at that, you can just search for VoteCast at the top search bar there, and you're good. And then, of course, our own .org site, so ap.org. If anyone's interested in more of the election work that we do, from the primaries to the general, go to ap.org, click topics, you'll see politics, and away you go. Have fun.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dwayne. This has been a great conversation. Cheers, and we'll hang out after, and we'll do a little more chatting.
Sounds great.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.